Welcome. Step into a world where stories breathe through my voice. Leave everything behind, find your perfect spot, and let's begin.
Nobody's blaming you for anything, the doctor said, and Eleanor felt that she had been reproved. I hope my clothes will be good enough for her, she said tartly. The doctor turned, looking around the room. He touched one finger gingerly to the letters on the wall and moved Theodora's yellow shirt with his foot. Later, he said absently. Tomorrow, perhaps. He glanced at Eleanor and smiled. I can make an exact sketch of this, he said. I can help you, Eleanor said. It makes me sick, but it doesn't frighten me. Yes, the doctor said, I think we'd better close up the room for now. However, we don't want Theodora blundering in here again. Then later, at my leisure, I can study it. Also, he said with a flash of amusement, I would not like to have Mrs. Dudley coming in here to straighten up. Eleanor watched silently while he locked the hall door from inside the room, and then they went through to the bathroom, and he locked the connecting door into Theodora's green room. I'll see about moving in another bed, he said, and then, with some awkwardness, You've kept your head well, Eleanor. It's a help to me. I told you, it makes me sick, but it doesn't frighten me, she said, pleased, and turned to Theodora. Theodora was lying on Eleanor's bed, and Eleanor saw, with a queasy turn, that Theodora had got red on her hands, and it was rubbing off onto Eleanor's pillow. Look, she said harshly, coming over to Theodora, you'll have to wear my clothes until you get new ones, or until we get the others cleaned. Cleaned? Theodora rolled convulsively on the bed and pressed her stained hands against her eyes. Cleaned? For heaven's sake, Eleanor said, let me wash you off. She thought, without trying to find a reason, that she had never felt such uncontrollable loathing for any person before, and she went into the bathroom and soaked a towel and came back to scrub thoroughly at Theodora's hands and face. You're filthy with the stuff, she said, hating to touch Theodora. Suddenly Theodora smiled at her. I don't really think you did it, she said, and Eleanor turned to see that Luke was behind her, looking down at them. What a fool I am, Theodora said to him, and Luke laughed. You will be a delight in Nell's red sweater, he said. She's wicked, Eleanor thought, beastly and soiled and dirty. She took the towel into the bathroom and left it to soak in cold water. When she came out, Luke was saying, Another bed in here. You girls are going to share a room from now on. Share a room and share our clothes, Theodora said. We're going to be practically twins. Cousins, Eleanor said. But no one heard her. 3. It was the custom rigidly adhered to, Luke said, turning the brandy in his glass, for the public executioner, before a quartering, to outline his knife strokes in chalk upon the belly of his victim, for fear of a slip, you understand. I would like to hit her with a stick, Eleanor thought, looking down on Theodora's head beside her chair. I would like to batter her with rocks. An exquisite refinement, exquisite, because of course the chalk strokes would have been almost unbearable, excruciating, if the victim were ticklish. I hate her, Eleanor thought. She sickens me. She's all washed and clean, and wearing my red sweater. When the death was by hanging in chains, however, the executioner... Nell? Theodora looked up at her and smiled. I really am sorry, you know, she said. I would like to watch her dying, Eleanor thought, and smiled back and said, Don't be silly. Among the Sufis, there's a teaching that the universe has never been created and consequently cannot be destroyed. I have spent the afternoon, Luke announced gravely, browsing in our little library. The doctor sighed. No chess tonight, I think, he said to Luke, and Luke nodded. It has been an exhausting day, the doctor said, and I think you ladies should retire early. Not until I'm well dulled with brandy, Theodora said firmly. Fear, the doctor said, is the relinquishment of logic, the willing relinquishing of reasonable patterns. We yield to it, or we fight it, but we cannot meet it halfway. I was wondering earlier, Eleanor said, feeling she had somehow an apology to make to all of them. I thought I was altogether calm, and yet now I know I was terribly afraid. She frowned, puzzled, and they waited for her to go on. When I am afraid, I can see perfectly the sensible, beautiful, not afraid side of the world. I can see chairs and tables and windows staying the same, not affected in the least. And I can see things like the carefully woven texture of the carpet, not even moving. But when I am afraid, I no longer exist in any relation to these things. I suppose because things are not afraid. I think we are only afraid of ourselves, the doctor said slowly. No, Luke said, of seeing ourselves clearly and without disguise. Of knowing what we really want, Theodora said. She pressed her cheek against Eleanor's hand, and Eleanor, hating the touch of her, took her hand away quickly. I'm always afraid of being alone, Eleanor said and wondered. Am I talking like this? Am I saying something I'll regret bitterly tomorrow? Am I making more guilt for myself? Those letters spelled out my name, and none of you know what it feels like. It's so familiar. She gestured to them almost in appeal. Try to see, she said. It's my own dear name, and it belongs to me. And something is using it, and writing it, and calling me with it, and my own name. She stopped and said, looking from one of them to another, even down to Theodora's face looking up at her, Look, there's only one of me, and it's all I've got. I hate seeing myself dissolve and slip and separate so that I'm living in one half my mind, and I see the other half of me helpless and frantic and driven, and I can't stop it. But I know it's not really going to be hurt, and yet time is so long, and even a second goes on, and I could stand any of it if I could only surrender. Surrender? Said the doctor sharply, and Eleanor stared. Surrender? Luke repeated. I don't know, Eleanor said, perplexed. I was just talking along, she told herself. I was saying something. What was I just saying? She's done this before, Luke said to the doctor. I know, said the doctor gravely, and Eleanor could feel them all looking at her. I'm sorry, she said. Did I make a fool of myself? It's probably because I'm afraid. Not at all, the doctor said, still grave. Drink your brandy. Brandy? And Eleanor looked down, realizing that she held a brandy glass. What did I say? She asked him. Theodora chuckled. Drink, she said. You'll need it, my Nell. Obediently, Eleanor sipped at her brandy, feeling clearly its sharp burn, and then said to the doctor, I must have said something silly, from the way you're all staring at me. The doctor laughed. Stop trying to be the center of attention. Vanity, said Luke, serenely. Have to be in the limelight, Theodora said, and they smiled fondly, all looking at Eleanor. 4. Sitting up in the two beds beside each other, Eleanor and Theodora reached out between and held hands tight. The room was brutally cold and thickly dark. From the room next door, the room, which until that morning had been Theodora's, came the steady, low sound of a voice babbling, too low for words to be understood, too steady for disbelief. Holding hands so hard that each of them could feel the other's bones, Eleanor and Theodora listened. And the low, steady sound went on and on, the voice lifting sometimes for an emphasis on a mumbled word, falling sometimes to a breath, going on and on. Then, without warning, there was a little laugh, a small gurgling laugh that broke through the babbling, and rose as it laughed, up and up the scale, and then broke off suddenly in a little painful gasp, and the voice went on. Theodora's grasp loosened and tightened, and Eleanor, lulled for a minute by the sounds, started and looked across to where Theodora ought to be in the darkness, and then thought screamingly, Why is it dark? Why is it dark? She rolled and clutched Theodora's hand with both of hers, and tried to speak, and could not, and held on, blindly and frozen, trying to stand her mind on its feet, trying to reason again. We left the light on, she told herself, so why is it dark? Theodora, she tried to whisper, and her mouth could not move. "Theodora," she tried to ask, "why is it dark?" And the voice went on, babbling, low and steady, a little liquid, gloating sound. She thought she might be able to distinguish words if she lay perfectly still. If she lay perfectly still and listened and heard the voice going on and on, never ceasing, and she hung desperately to Theodora's hand and felt an answering weight on her own hand. Then the little gurgling laugh came again, and the rising, mad sound of it drowned out the voice. And then, suddenly, absolute silence. Eleanor took a breath, wondering if she could speak now, and then she heard a little soft cry which broke her heart, a little infinitely sad cry, a little sweet moan of wild sadness. "It's a child," she thought, with disbelief. "A child is crying somewhere." And then, upon that thought, came the wild, shrieking voice she had never heard before, and yet knew she had heard always in her nightmares. "Go away," it screamed. "Go away, don't hurt me." And after sobbing, "Please don't hurt me. Please let me go home." And then the little sad crying again. "I can't stand it," Eleanor thought concretely. "This is monstrous. This is cruel. They've been hurting a child, and I won't let anyone hurt a child." And the babbling went on, low and steady, on and on and on. The voice rising a little and falling a little, going on and on. Now, Eleanor thought, perceiving that she was lying sideways on the bed in the black darkness, holding with both hands to Theodora's hand, holding so tight she could feel the fine bones of Theodora's fingers. "Now, I will not endure this. They think to scare me. Well, they have. I am scared. But more than that, I am a person. I am human. I am a walking, reasoning, humorous human being, and I will take a lot from this lunatic, filthy house, but I will not go along with hurting a child. No, I will not. I will, by God, get my mouth to open right now, and I will yell. I will yell. "Stop it!" she shouted. And the lights were on the way they had left them, and Theodora was sitting up in bed, startled and dishevelled. "What?" Theodora was saying. "What, Nell? What?" "Good God," Eleanor said, flinging herself out of bed and across the room to stand, shuddering in a corner. "Good God! Whose hand was I holding?" Chapter 6. "I am learning the pathways of the heart," Eleanor thought quite seriously, and then wondered what she could have meant by thinking any such thing. It was afternoon, and she sat in the sunlight on the steps of the summer house beside Luke. These are the silent pathways of the heart, she thought. She knew that she was pale and still shaken, with dark circles under her eyes, but the sun was warm, and the leaves moved gently overhead, and Luke beside her lay lazily against the step. "Luke," she asked, going slowly for fear of ridicule, "why do people want to talk to each other? I mean, what are the things people always want to find out about other people?" "What do you want to know about me, for instance?" He laughed, she thought, but why not ask what he wants to know about me? He is so extremely vain. And laughed in turn and said, "What can I ever know about you beyond what I see?" "See" was the least of the words she might have chosen, but the safest. "Tell me something that only I will ever know," was perhaps what she wanted to ask him, or "What will you give me to remember you by?" Or even, "Nothing of the least importance has ever belonged to me. Can you help?" Then she wondered if she had been foolish or bold, amazed at her own thoughts, but he only stared down at the leaf he held in his hands, and frowned a little, as one who devotes himself completely to an absorbing problem. "He's trying to phrase everything to make as good an impression as possible," she thought, "and I will know how he holds me by what he answers. How is he anxious to appear to me? Does he think that I will be content with small mysticism, or will he exert himself to seem unique? Is he going to be gallant? That would be humiliating, because then he would show that he knows that gallantry enchants me. Will he be mysterious? Mad? And how am I to receive this, which I perceive already will be a confidence, even if it is not true? Grant that Luke take me at my worth, she thought, or at least let me not see the difference. Let him be wise, or let me be blind. Don't let me, she hoped concretely, don't let me know too surely what he thinks of me. Then he looked at her briefly and smiled, what she was coming to know as his self-deprecatory smile. Did Theodora, she wondered, and the thought was unwelcome, did Theodora know him as well as this? I never had a mother, he said, and the shock was enormous. Is that all he thinks of me? His estimate of what I want to hear of him? Will I enlarge this into a confidence, making me worthy of great confidences? Shall I sigh, murmur, walk away? No one ever loved me because I belonged, he said. I suppose you can understand that. No, she thought, you're not going to catch me so cheaply. I do not understand words and will not accept them in trade for my feelings. This man is a parrot. I will tell him that I can never understand such a thing, that maudlin self-pity does not move directly at my heart. I will not make a fool of myself by encouraging him to mock me. I understand, yes, she said. I thought you might, he said, and she wanted quite honestly to slap his face. I think you must be a very fine person, Nell, he said, and then spoiled it by adding, warm-hearted and honest. Afterwards, when you go home... His voice trailed off, and she thought, either he is beginning to tell me something extremely important, or he is killing time until the conversation can gracefully be ended. He would not speak in this fashion without a reason. He does not willingly give himself away. Does he think that a human gesture of affection might seduce me into hurling myself madly at him? Is he afraid that I cannot behave like a lady? What does he know about me? About how I think and feel? Does he feel sorry for me? Journeys end in lovers' meeting, she said. Yes, he said, I never had a mother, as I told you. Now I find that everyone else has had something that I missed. He smiled at her. I am entirely selfish, he said ruefully, and always hoping that someone will tell me to behave. Someone will make herself responsible for me and make me be grown up. He is altogether selfish, she thought in some surprise. The only man I have ever sat and talked to alone, and I am impatient. He is simply not very interesting. Why don't you grow up by yourself? She asked him, and wondered how many people, how many women, had already asked him that. You're clever. And how many times had he answered that way? This conversation must be largely instinctive, she thought with amusement, and said gently, You must be a very lonely person. All I want is to be cherished, she thought, and here I am talking gibberish with a selfish man. You must be very lonely indeed. He touched her hand and smiled again. You were so lucky, he told her. You had a mother. 2. I found it in the library, Luke said. I swear I found it in the library. Incredible, the doctor said. Look, Luke said. He set the great book on the table and turned to the title page. He made it himself. Look, the title has been lettered in ink. Memories for Sophia Ann Lester Crane, a legacy for her education and enlightenment during her lifetime, from her affectionate and devoted father, Hugh Desmond Lester Crane, 21st June, 1881. They pressed around the table, Theodora and Eleanor and the doctor, while Luke lifted and turned the first great page of the book. You see, Luke said, his little girl is to learn humility. He has clearly cut up a number of fine old books to make this scrapbook, because I seem to recognize several of the pictures, and they're all glued in. The vanity of human accomplishment, the doctor said sadly. Think of the books Hugh Crane hacked apart to make this. Now here is a Goya etching, a horrible thing for a little girl to meditate upon. Underneath is written, Luke said, under this ugly picture, Honour thy father and thy mother, daughter, authors of thy being, upon whom a heavy charge has been laid, that they lead their child in innocence and righteousness along the fearful narrow path to everlasting bliss, and render her up at last to her God, a pious and a virtuous soul. Reflect, daughter, upon the joy in heaven as the souls of these tiny creatures wing upward, released before they have learned aught of sin or faithlessness, and make it thine unceasing duty to remain as pure as these. Poor baby, Eleanor said, and gasped as Luke turned the page. Hugh Crane's second moral lesson derived from a colour plate of a snake pit, and vividly painted snakes writhed and twisted along the page about the message, neatly printed and touched with gold. Eternal damnation is the lot of mankind. Neither tears nor reparation can undo man's heritage of sin. Daughter, hold apart from this world, that its lusts and ingratitudes corrupt thee not. Daughter, preserve thyself. Next comes hell, Luke said. Don't look if you're squeamish. I think I'll skip hell, Eleanor said, but read it to me. Wise of you, the doctor said. An illustration from Fox, one of the less attractive deaths, I have always thought, although who can fathom the ways of martyrs? See this, though, Luke said. He's burnt away a corner of the page. And here is what he says. Daughter, could you but hear for a moment the agony, the screaming, the dreadful crying out and repentance of those poor souls condemned to everlasting flame, could thine eyes be seared, but for an instant, with the red glare of wasteland burning always. Alas, wretched beings in undying pain! Daughter, your father has this minute touched the corner of his page to his candle, and seen the frail paper shrivel and curl in the flame. Consider, daughter, that the heat of this candle is to the everlasting fires of hell as a grain of sand to the reaching desert. And as this paper burns in its slight flame, so shall your soul burn for ever in fire 1,000-fold more keen. I bet he read it to her every night before she went to sleep, Theodora said. Wait, Luke said, you haven't seen heaven yet. Even you can look at this one now. It's Blake, and a bit stern, I think, but obviously better than hell. Holy, 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 in the pure light of heaven, the angels praise him and one another unendingly. Daughter, it is here that I will seek thee. What a labour of love it is, the doctor said. Hours of time just planning it, and the lettering is so dainty, and the gilt. Now the 7 deadly sins, Luke said, and I think the old boy drew them himself. He really put his heart into gluttony, Theodora said. I'm not sure I'll ever be hungry again. Wait till lust, Luke told her. The old fellow outdid himself. I don't really want to look at any more of it, I think, Theodora said. I'll sit over here with Nell, and if you come across any particularly edifying moral precepts you think would do me good, read them aloud. Here is lust, Luke said. Was ever woman in this humour wooed? Good heavens, said the doctor. Good heavens! He must have drawn it himself, Luke said. For a child? The doctor was outraged. Her very own scrapbook. Note pride, the very image von Nell here. What? Said Eleanor, starting up. Teasing, the doctor said placatingly. Don't come to look, my dear, he's teasing you. Sloth now, Luke said. Envy, said the doctor. How the poor child dared to transgress. The last page is the very nicest, I think. This, ladies, is Hugh Crane's blood. Now, do you want to see Hugh Crane's blood? No, thank you. Theo? No? In any case, I insist for the sake of your two consciences in reading what Hugh Crane has to say in closing his book. Daughter, sacred pacts are signed in blood, and I have here taken from my own wrist the vital fluid with which I bind you. Live virtuously, be meek, have faith in thy Redeemer, and in me thy Father. And I swear to thee that we will be joined together hereafter in unending bliss. Accept these precepts from thy devoted father, who, in humbleness of spirit, has made this book. May it serve its purpose well, my feeble effort, and preserve my child from the pitfalls of this world, and bring her safe to her father's arms in heaven. And signed, Thy ever-loving Father in this world and the next, author of thy being and guardian of thy virtue, in meekest love, Hugh Crane. Theodora shuddered. How he must have enjoyed it, she said, signing his name in his own blood. I can see him laughing his head off. Not healthy, not at all a healthy work for a man, the doctor said. But she must have been very small when her father left the house, Eleanor said. I wonder if he ever did read it to her. I'm sure he did, leaning over her cradle and spitting out the words so that they would take root in her little mind. Hugh Crane, Theodora said, you were a dirty old man, and you made a dirty old house, and if you can still hear me from anywhere, I would like to tell you to your face that I genuinely hope you will spend eternity in that foul, horrible picture and never stop burning for a minute. She made a wild, derisive gesture around the room, and for a minute, still remembering, they were all silent, as though waiting for an answer. And then the coals in the fire fell with a little crash, and the doctor looked at his watch, and Luke rose. The sun is over the yardarm, the doctor said happily. 3. Theodora curled by the fire, looking up wickedly at Eleanor. At the other end of the room, the chessmen moved softly, jarring with little sounds against the table, and Theodora spoke gently, tormentingly. Will you have him in your little apartment now, and offer him to drink from your cup of stars? Eleanor looked into the fire, not answering. I've been so silly, she thought. I've been a fool. Is there room enough for two? Would he come if you asked him? Nothing could be worse than this, Eleanor thought. I've been a fool. Perhaps he has been longing for a tiny home, something smaller, of course, than Hill House. Perhaps he will come home with you. A fool, a ludicrous fool. Your white curtains, your tiny stone lions. Eleanor looked down at her almost gently. But I had to come, she said, and stood up, turning blindly to get away. Not hearing the startled voices behind her, not seeing where or how she went, she blundered somehow to the great front door and out into the soft, warm night. I had to come, she said to the world outside. Fear and guilt are sisters. Theodora caught her on the lawn. Silent, angry, hurt, they left Hill House side by side, walking together, each sorry for the other. A person angry or laughing or terrified or jealous will go stubbornly on into extremes of behaviour impossible at another time. Neither Eleanor nor Theodora reflected for a minute that it was imprudent for them to walk far from Hill House after dark. Each was so bent upon her own despair that escape into darkness was vital, and containing themselves in that tight, vulnerable, impossible cloak which is fury, they stamped along together, each achingly aware of the other, each determined to be the last to speak. Eleanor spoke first, finally. She had hurt her foot against a rock and tried to be too proud to notice it, but after a minute, her foot paining, she said, in a voice tight with the attempt to sound level, I can't imagine why you think you have any right to interfere in my affairs. Her language formal to prevent a flood of recrimination or undeserved reproach. Were they not strangers? Cousins? I'm sure that nothing I do is of any interest to you. That's right, Theodora said grimly. Nothing that you do is of any interest to me. We're walking on either side of a fence, Eleanor thought, but I have a right to live too. and I wasted an hour with Luke at the summer house trying to prove it. I hurt my foot, she said. I'm sorry. Theodora sounded genuinely grieved. You know what a beast he is, she hesitated. A rake, she said finally with a touch of amusement. I'm sure it's nothing to me what he is, and then, because they were women quarrelling, as if you cared anyway. He shouldn't be allowed to get away with it, Theodora said. Get away with what? Eleanor asked daintily. You're making a fool of yourself, Theodora said. Suppose I'm not, though. You'd mind terribly if you turned out to be wrong this time, wouldn't you? Theodora's voice was wearied, cynical. If I'm wrong, she said, I will bless you with all my heart. Fool that you are. You could hardly say anything else. They were moving along the path towards the brook. In the darkness their feet felt that they were going downhill, and each, privately and perversely, accused the other of taking deliberately a path they had followed together once before in happiness. Anyway, Eleanor said in a reasonable tone, it doesn't mean anything to you, no matter what happens. Why should you care whether I'm making a fool of myself? Theodora was silent for a minute, walking in the darkness, and Eleanor was suddenly absurdly sure that Theodora had put out a hand to her unseen. Theo, Eleanor said awkwardly, I'm no good at talking to people and saying things. Theodora laughed. What are you good at? She demanded. Running away? Nothing irrevocable had yet been spoken, but there was only the barest margin of safety left them, each of them moving delicately along the outskirts of an open question. And once spoken, such a question as, Do you love me? Could never be answered or forgotten. They walked slowly, meditating, wondering, and the path sloped down from their feet, and they followed, walking side by side, in the most extreme intimacy of expectation. Their fainting and hesitation done with, they could only wait passively for resolution. Each knew, almost within a breath, what the other was thinking about wanting to say. Each of them almost wept for the other. They perceived at the same moment the change in the path, and each knew then the other's knowledge of it. Theodora took Eleanor's arm, and afraid to stop, they moved on, slowly, close together, and ahead of them the path widened, and blackened, and curved. Eleanor caught her breath, and Theodora's hand tightened, warning her to be quiet. On either side of them, the trees, silent, relinquished the dark colour they had held, paled, grew transparent, and stood, white and ghastly, against the black sky. The grass was colourless, the path wide and black. There was nothing else. Eleanor's teeth were chattering, and the nausea of fear almost doubled her. Her arm shivered under Theodora's holding hand, now almost a clutch, and she felt every slow step as a willed act, a precise mad insistence upon the putting of one foot down after the other as the only sane choice. Her eyes hurt with tears against the screaming blackness of the path and the shuddering whiteness of the trees, and she thought, with a clear, intelligent picture of the words in her mind, burning. Now, I'm really afraid. They moved on, the path unrolling ahead of them, the white trees unchanging on either side, and above all, the black sky lying thick overhead. Their feet were shimmering white where they touched the path. Theodora's hand was pale and luminous. Ahead of them the path curved out of sight, and they walked slowly on, moving their feet precisely because it was the only physical act possible to them, the only thing left to keep them from sinking into the awful blackness and whiteness and luminous evil glow. Now I'm really afraid, Eleanor thought, in words of fire. Remotely, she could still feel Theodora's hand on her arm, but Theodora was distant, locked away. It was bitterly cold. with no human warmth near. Now I'm really afraid, Eleanor thought, and put her feet forward, one after another, shivering as they touched the path, shivering with mindless cold. The path unwound. Perhaps it was taking them somewhere, wilfully, since neither of them could step off it and go knowingly into the annihilation of whiteness that was the grass on either side. The path curved black and shining, and they followed. Theodora's hand tightened, and Eleanor caught her breath on a little sob. Had something moved ahead? Something whiter than the white trees, beckoning, fading into the trees. Watching. Was there movement beside them, imperceptible in the soundless night? Did some footsteps go invisibly along with them in the white grass? Where were they? The path led them to its destined end, and died beneath their feet. Eleanor and Theodora looked into a garden, their eyes blinded with the light of sun and rich colour. Incredibly, there was a picnic party on the grass in the garden. They could hear the laughter of the children and the affectionate, amused voices of the mother and father. The grass was richly, thickly green. The flowers were coloured red and orange and yellow. The sky was blue and gold. One child wore a scarlet jumper and raised its voice again in laughter, tumbling over a puppy in the grass. There was a checked tablecloth spread out, and smiling, the mother leaned over to take up a plate of bright fruit. Then Theodora screamed. "Don't look back!" she cried out in a voice high with fear. "Don't look back! Don't look! Run!" Running, without knowing why she ran, Eleanor thought that she would catch her foot in the checked tablecloth. She was afraid she might stumble over the puppy, but as they ran across the garden, there was nothing except weeds growing blackly in the darkness, and Theodora, screaming still, trampled over the bushes where there had been flowers, and stumbled sobbing over half-buried stones and what might have been a broken cup. Then they were beating and scratching wildly at the white stone wall where vines grew blackly, screaming still and begging to be let out, until a rusted iron gate gave way and they ran, crying and gasping and somehow holding hands across the kitchen garden of Hill House, and crashed through a back door into the kitchen to see Luke and the doctor hurrying to them. "What happened?" Luke said, catching at Theodora. "Are you all right?" "We've been nearly crazy," the doctor said. "We've been out looking for you for hours." "It was a picnic," Eleanor said. She had fallen into a kitchen chair, and she looked down at her hands, scratched and bleeding and shaking without her knowledge. "We tried to get out," she told them, holding her hands out for them to see. "It was a picnic with the children." Theodora laughed in a little continuing cry, laughing on and on thinly, and said through her laughter, "I looked back. I went and looked behind us," and laughed on. "The children and the puppy." "Eleanor?" Theodora turned wildly and put her head against Eleanor. "Eleanor," she said, "Eleanor." And, holding Theodora, Eleanor looked up at Luke and the doctor, and felt the room rock madly, and time, as she had always known time, stop. 7. On the afternoon of the day when Mrs. Montague was expected, Eleanor went alone to the hills above Hill House, not really intending to arrive at any place in particular, not even caring where or how she went, wanting only to be secret and out from under the heavy dark wood of the house. She found a small spot where the grass was soft and dry and lay down, wondering how many years it had been since she had lain on soft grass, to be alone to think. Around her the trees and wild flowers, with that oddly courteous air of natural things suddenly interrupted in their pressing occupations of growing and dying, turned towards her with attention, as though, dull and imperceptive as she was, it was still necessary for them to be gentle to a creature so unfortunate as not to be rooted in the ground, forced to go from one place to another, heart-breakingly mobile. Idly, Eleanor picked a wild daisy which died in her fingers, and lying on the grass looked up into its dead face. There was nothing in her mind beyond an overwhelming wild happiness. She pulled at the daisy and wondered, smiling at herself, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do?" 2. "Put the bags down in the hall, Arthur," Mrs. Montague said. "Wouldn't you think there'd be someone here to help us with this door? They'll have to get someone to take the bags upstairs. John! John!" My dear, Dr. Montague hurried into the hallway, carrying his napkin, and kissed his wife obediently on the cheek she held out for him. "How nice that you got here. We'd given up on you." "I said I'd be here today, didn't I? Did you ever know me not to come when I said I would? I brought Arthur." "Arthur," the doctor said, without enthusiasm. "Well, somebody had to drive," Mrs. Montague said. "I imagine you expected that I would drive myself all the way out here, because you know perfectly well I get tired. How do you do?" The doctor turned smiling on Eleanor and Theodora, with Luke behind them, clustered uncertainly in the doorway. "My dear," he said, "these are my friends who have been staying in Hill House with me these past few days. Theodora, Eleanor Vance, Luke Sanderson." Theodora and Eleanor and Luke murmured civilly, and Mrs. Montague nodded and said, "I see you didn't bother to wait dinner for us." "We'd given up on you," the doctor said. "I believe that I told you that I would be here today. Of course, it is perfectly possible that I'm mistaken, but it is my recollection that I said I would be here today. I'm sure I will get to know all your names very soon. This gentleman is Arthur Parker. He drove me here because I dislike driving myself. Arthur, these are John's friends. Can anybody do something about our suitcases?" The doctor and Luke approached, murmuring, and Mrs. Montague went on, "I am to be in your most haunted room, of course. Arthur can go anywhere. That blue suitcase is mine, young man, and the small attaché case, they will go in your most haunted room." "The nursery, I think," Dr. Montague said when Luke looked at him inquiringly. "I believe the nursery is one source of disturbance," he told his wife, and she sighed irritably. "It does seem to me that you could be more methodical," she said. "You've been here nearly a week, and I suppose you've done nothing with planchette, automatic writing. I don't imagine either of these young women has mediumistic gifts. Those are Arthur's bags right there. He brought his golf clubs, just in case." "Just in case of what?" Theodora asked blankly, and Mrs. Montague turned to regard her coldly. "Please don't let me interrupt your dinner," she said finally. "There's a definite cold spot just outside the nursery door," the doctor told his wife, hopefully. "Yes, dear, very nice. Isn't that young man going to take Arthur's bags upstairs? You do seem to be in a good deal of confusion here, don't you? After nearly a week, I certainly thought you'd have things in some kind of order. Any figures materialize? There have been decided manifestations. Well, I'm here now, and we'll get things going right. Where is Arthur to put the car?" "There's an empty stable block in back of the house where we have put our other cars. He can take it around in the morning." "Nonsense! I do not believe in putting things off, John, as you know perfectly well. Arthur will have plenty to do in the morning without adding tonight's work. He must move the car at once." "It's dark outside," the doctor said hesitantly. "John, you astound me. Is it your belief that I do not know whether it is dark outside at night? The car has lights, John, and that young man can go with Arthur to show him the way." "Thank you," Luke said grimly, "but we have had a positive policy against going outside after dark." Arthur may, of course, if he cares to, but I will not. The young ladies, the doctor said, had a shocking— Young man's a coward, Arthur said. Young man's a coward, Arthur said. He had concluded his fetching of suitcases and golf bags and hampers from the car, and now stood beside Mrs. Montague, looking down on Luke. Arthur's face was red, and his hair was white, and now, scorning Luke, he bristled. Ought to be ashamed of yourself, fellow, in front of the women. The women are just as much afraid as I am, Luke said primly. Indeed, indeed. Dr. Montague put his hand on Arthur's arm soothingly. After you've been here for a while, Arthur, you'll understand that Luke's attitude is sensible, not cowardly. We make a point of staying together after dark. I must say, John, I never expected to find you all so nervous, Mrs. Montague said. I deplore fear in these matters. She tapped her foot irritably. You know perfectly well, John, that those who have passed beyond expect to see us happy and smiling. They want to know that we are thinking of them lovingly. The spirits dwelling in this house may actually be suffering because they are aware that you are afraid of them. We can talk about it later, the doctor said wearily. Now, how about dinner? Of course. Mrs. Montague glanced at Theodora and Eleanor. What a pity we had to interrupt you, she said. Have you had dinner? Naturally, we have not had dinner, John. I said we would be here for dinner, didn't I? Or am I mistaken again? At any rate, I told Mrs. Dudley that you would be here, the doctor said, opening the door which led to the game-room and on into the dining-room. She left us a splendid feast. Poor Dr. Montague, Eleanor thought, standing aside to let the doctor take his wife into the dining-room. He is so uncomfortable. I wonder how long she's going to stay. Theodora whispered in her ear. Maybe her suitcase is filled with ectoplasm, Eleanor said hopefully. And how long will you be able to stay? Dr. Montague asked, sitting at the head of the dinner table with his wife, cosily beside him. Well, dear, Mrs. Montague said, tasting daintily of Mrs. Dudley's caper sauce, you have found a fair cook, have you not? You know that Arthur has to get back to his school. Arthur is a headmaster, she explained down the table, and he has generously cancelled his appointments for Monday, so we had better leave Monday afternoon, and then Arthur can be there for classes on Tuesday. A lot of happy schoolboys Arthur, no doubt, left behind, Luke said softly to Theodora, and Theodora said, But today is only Saturday. I do not mind this cooking at all, Mrs. Montague said. John, I will speak to your cook in the morning. Mrs. Dudley is an admirable woman, the doctor said carefully. But fancy for my taste, Arthur said. I'm a meat and potatoes man myself, he explained to Theodora. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't read trash. Bad example for the fellows at the school. They look up to one, I bet you know. I'm sure they must all model themselves on you, Theodora said soberly. Get a bad heart now and then, Arthur said, shaking his head. No taste for sports, you know, moping in corners. Cry-babies. Knock that out of them fast enough. He reached for the butter. Mrs. Montague leaned forward to look down the table at Arthur. Eat lightly, Arthur, she advised. We have a busy night ahead of us. What on earth do you plan to do? The doctor asked. I'm sure that you would never dream of going about these things with any system, but you will have to admit, John, that in this area I have simply more of an instinctive understanding. Women do, you know, John, at least some women. She paused and regarded Eleanor and Theodora speculatively. Neither of them, I dare say, unless, of course, I am mistaken again. You are very fond of pointing out my errors, John. My dear, I cannot abide a slipshod job in anything. Arthur will patrol, of course. I brought Arthur for that purpose. It is so rare, she explained to Luke, who sat on her other side, to find persons in the educational field who are interested in the other world. You will find Arthur surprisingly well informed. I will recline in your haunted room with only a nightlight burning, and will endeavor to get in touch with the elements disturbing this house. I never sleep when there are troubled spirits about, she told Luke, who nodded, speechless. Little sound common sense, Arthur said. Got to go about these things in the right way. Never pays to aim too low. Tell my fellows that. I think perhaps after dinner we will have a little session with Planchette, Mrs. Montague said. Just Arthur and I, of course. The rest of you, I can see, are not ready yet. You will only drive away the spirits. We will need a quiet room. The library, Luke suggested politely. The library, I think it might do. Books are frequently very good carriers, you know. Materializations are often best produced in rooms where there are books. I cannot think of any time when materialization was in any way hampered by the presence of books. I suppose the library has been dusted. Arthur sometimes sneezes. Mrs. Dudley keeps the entire house in perfect order, the doctor said. I really will speak to Mrs. Dudley in the morning. You will show us the library then, John, and that young man will bring down my case. Not the large suitcase, mind, but the small attaché case. Bring it to me in the library. We will join you later. After a session with Planchette, I require a glass of milk and perhaps a small cake. Crackers will do if they are not too heavily salted. A few minutes of quiet conversation with congenial people is also very helpful, particularly if I am to be receptive during the night. The mind is a precise instrument and cannot be tended to carefully. Arthur? She bowed distantly to Eleanor and Theodora and went out, escorted by Arthur, Luke, and her husband. After a minute, Theodora said, I think I'm going to be simply crazy about Mrs. Montague. I don't know, Eleanor said. Arthur is rather more to my taste, and Luke is a coward, I think. Poor Luke, Theodora said. He never had a mother. Looking up, Eleanor found that Theodora was regarding her with a curious smile, and she moved away from the table so quickly that the glass spilled. We shouldn't be alone, she said, oddly breathless. We've got to find the others. She left the table and almost ran from the room, and Theodora ran after her, laughing, down the corridor and into the little parlour where Luke and the doctor stood before the fire. Please, sir, Luke was saying meekly, who is Planchette? The doctor sighed irritably. Imbeciles, he said, and then, sorry, the whole idea annoys me, but if she likes it. He turned and poked the fire furiously. Planchette, he went on after a moment, is a device similar to the Ouija board, or perhaps I might explain better by saying that it is a form of automatic writing, a method of communicating with intangible beings, although to my way of thinking the only intangible beings who ever get in touch through one of those things are the imaginations of the people running it. Yes, well, Planchette is a little piece of light wood, usually heart-shaped or triangular. A pencil is set into the narrow end, and at the other end is a pair of wheels or feet which will slip easily over paper. Two people place fingers on it, ask it questions, and the object moves, pushed by what force we will not here discuss, and writes answers. The Ouija board, as I say, is very similar, except that the object moves on a board pointing to separate letters. An ordinary wine glass will do the same thing. I have seen it tried with a child's wheeled toy, although I will admit that it looked silly. Each person uses the tips of the fingers of one hand, keeping the other hand free to note down questions and answers. The answers are invariably, I believe, meaningless, although, of course, my wife will tell you different. Balderdash, and he went at the fire again. Schoolgirls, he said. Superstition. 3. Planchette has been very kind tonight, Mrs. Montague said. John, there are definitely foreign elements present in this house. Quite a splendid sitting, really, Arthur said. He waved a sheaf of papers triumphantly. We've got a good deal of information for you, Mrs. Montague said. Now, Planchette was quite insistent about a nun. Have you learned anything about a nun, John? In Hill House? Not likely. Planchette felt very strongly about a nun, John. Perhaps something of the sort, a dark, vague figure, even, has been seen in the neighborhood, villagers terrified when staggering home late at night. A figure of a nun is a fairly common... John, if you please, I assume you're suggesting that I am mistaken, or perhaps it is your intention to point out that Planchette may be mistaken. I assure you, and you must believe, Planchette, even if my word is not good enough for you, that a nun was most specifically suggested. I'm only trying to say, my dear, that the wraith of a nun is far and away the most common form of appearance. There has never been such a thing connected with Hill House, but in almost every... John, if you please, I assume I may continue? Or is Planchette to be dismissed without a hearing? Thank you. Mrs. Montague composed herself. Now then, there is also a name spelled variously as Helen, or Helene, or Eleanor. Who might that be? My dear, many people have lived. Helen brought us a warning against a mysterious monk. Now, when a monk and a nun both turn up in the house... Except the place was built on an older site, Arthur said. Influences prevailing, you know. Older influences hanging around, he explained, more fully. It sounds very much like broken vows, does it not? Very much. Had a lot of that back then, you know. Temptation, probably. I hardly think, the doctor began. I dare say she was walled up alive, Mrs. Montague said. The nun, I mean. They always did that, you know. You've no idea the messages I've had from nuns walled up alive. There is no case on record of any nun ever being... John, may I point out to you once more that I myself have had messages from nuns walled up alive? Do you think I am telling you a fib, John? Or do you suppose that a nun would deliberately pretend to have been walled up alive when she was not? Is it possible that I am mistaken once more, John? Certainly not, my dear, Dr. Montague sighed wearily. With one candle and a crust of bread, Arthur told Theodora. Horrible thing to do, when you think about it. No nun was ever walled up alive, the doctor said sullenly. He raised his voice slightly. It is a legend, a story, a libel circulated. All right, John, we won't quarrel over it. You may believe whatever you choose. Just understand, however, that sometimes purely materialistic views must give way before facts. Now, it is a proven fact that among the visitations troubling this house are a nun and a... What else was there? Luke asked hastily. I'm so interested in hearing what, Planchette had to say. Mrs. Montague waggled a finger roguishly. Nothing about you, young man, although one of the ladies present may hear something of interest. Impossible woman, Eleanor thought. Impossible, vulgar, possessive woman. Now, Helen, Mrs. Montague went on, wants us to search the cellar for an old well. Don't tell me Helen was buried alive, the doctor said. I hardly think so, John. I am sure she would have mentioned it. As a matter of fact, Helen was most unclear about just what we were to find in the well. I doubt, however, that it will be treasure. One so rarely meets with real treasure in a case of this kind. More likely evidence of the missing nun. More likely 80 years of rubbish. John, I cannot understand this skepticism in you, of all people. After all, you did come to this house to collect evidence of supernatural activity, and now, when I bring you a full account of the causes and an indication of where to start looking, you are positively scornful. We have no authority to dig up the cellar. Arthur could, Mrs. Montague began hopefully, but the doctor said with firmness, No, My lease of the house specifically forbids me to tamper with the house itself. There will be no digging of cellars, no tearing out of woodwork, no ripping up of floors. Hill House is still a valuable property, and we are students, not vandals. I should think you'd want to know the truth, John. There is nothing I should like to know more. Dr. Montague stamped across the room to the chessboard and took up a knight and regarded it furiously. He looked as though he were doggedly counting to 100. Dear me, how patient one must be sometimes, Mrs. Montague sighed. But I do want to read you the little passage we received towards the end. Arthur, do you have it? Arthur shuffled through his sheaf of papers. It was just after the message about the flowers you're to send to your aunt, Mrs. Montague said. Planchette has a control named Marigot, she exclaimed, and Marigot takes a genuine personal interest in Arthur, brings him word from relatives, and so on. Not a fatal illness, you understand, Arthur said gravely. Have to send flowers, of course, but Marigot is most reassuring. Now, Mrs. Montague selected several pages and turned them over quickly. They were covered with loose, sprawling, penciled words, and Mrs. Montague frowned, running down the pages with her finger. Here, she said, Arthur, you read the questions and I'll read the answers. That way it will sound more natural. Off we go, Arthur said brightly and leaned over Mrs. Montague's shoulder. Now, let me see. Start right about here. With, who are you? Righto. Who are you? Nell, Mrs. Montague read in her sharp voice, and Eleanor and Theodora and Luke and the doctor turned, listening. Nell who? Eleanor, Nellie, Nell. They sometimes do that, Mrs. Montague broke off to explain. They repeat a word over and over to make sure it comes across all right. Arthur cleared his throat. What do you want? He read. Home. Do you want to go home? And Theodora shrugged comically at Eleanor. Want to be home. What are you doing here? Waiting. Waiting for what? Home. Arthur stopped and nodded profoundly. There it is again, he said, like a word, and use it over and over just for the sound of it. Ordinarily, we never ask why, Mrs. Montague said, because it tends to confuse Planchette. However, this time we were bold and came right out and asked. Arthur? Why? Arthur read. Mother, Mrs. Montague read. So, you see, this time we were right to ask because Planchette was perfectly free with the answer. Is Hill House your home? Arthur read levelly. Home, Mrs. Montague responded, and the doctor sighed. Are you suffering? Arthur read. No answer here. Mrs. Montague nodded reassuringly. Sometimes they dislike admitting to pain. It tends to discourage those of us left behind, you know. Just like Arthur's aunt, for instance, will never let on that she is sick. But Marigot always lets us know, and it's even worse when they've passed over. Stoical, Arthur confirmed and read. Can we help you? No, Mrs. Montague read. Can we do anything at all for you? No. Lost. Mrs. Montague looked up. You see, she asked. One word, over and over again. They love to repeat themselves. I've had one word go on to cover a whole page sometimes. What do you want? Arthur read. Mother, Mrs. Montague read back. Why? Child. Where is your mother? Home. Where is your home? Lost. And after that, Mrs. Montague said, folding the paper briskly, there was nothing but gibberish. Never known Planchette so cooperative, Arthur said confidingly to Theodora. Quite an experience, really. But why pick on Nell? Theodora asked with annoyance. Your fool Planchette has no right to send messages to people without permission, or you'll never get results by abusing Planchette, Arthur began, but Mrs. Montague interrupted him, swinging to stare at Eleanor. You're Nell, she demanded, and turned on Theodora. We thought you were Nell, she said. So, said Theodora impudently. It doesn't affect the messages, of course, Mrs. Montague said, tapping her paper irritably. Although I do think we might have been correctly introduced, I am sure the planchette knew the difference between you, but I certainly do not care to be misled. Don't feel neglected, Luke said to Theodora. We'll bury you alive. When I get a message from that thing, Theodora said, I expect it to be about hidden treasure. None of this nonsense about sending flowers to my aunt. They're all carefully avoiding looking at me, Eleanor thought. I've been singled out again, and they are kind enough to pretend it is nothing. Why do you all think that it was sent to me? She asked helplessly. Really, child, Mrs. Montague said, dropping the papers on the low table, I couldn't begin to say, although you are rather more than a child, aren't you? Perhaps you are more receptive psychically than you realize, although, and she turned away indifferently, how you could be a week in this house and not picking up the simplest message from beyond. That fire wants stirring. Nell doesn't want messages from beyond, Theodora said comfortingly, moving to take Eleanor's cold hand in hers. Nell wants her warm bed and a little sleep. Peace, Eleanor thought concretely. What I want in all this world is peace, a quiet spot to lie and think, a quiet spot up among the flowers where I can dream and tell myself sweet stories. 4. I, Arthur said richly, shall make my headquarters in the small room, just this side of the nursery, well within shouting distance. I shall have with me a drawn revolver. Do not take alarm, ladies, I am an excellent shot, and a flashlight, in addition to a most piercing whistle. I shall have no difficulty summoning the rest of you in case I observe anything worth your notice, or I require company. You may all sleep quietly, I assure you. Arthur, Mrs. Montague explained, will patrol the house. Every hour regularly he will make a round of the upstairs rooms. I think he need hardly bother with the downstairs rooms tonight, since I shall be up here. We have done this before many times. Come along, everyone. Silently they followed her up the staircase, watching her little affectionate dabs at the stair rail and the carvings on the walls. It is such a blessing, she said once, to know that the beings in this house are only waiting for an opportunity to tell their stories and free themselves from the burden of their sorrow. Now, Arthur will first of all inspect the bedrooms. Arthur, with apologies, ladies, with apologies, Arthur said, opening the door of the blue room, which Eleanor and Theodora shared. A dainty spot, he said plummily, fit for two such charming ladies. I shall, if you like, save you the trouble of glancing into the closet and under the bed. Solemnly they watched Arthur go down on his hands and knees and look under the beds and then rise, dusting his hands. Perfectly safe, he said. Now, where am I to be? Mrs. Montague asked. Where did that young man put my bags? Directly at the end of the hall, the doctor said. We call it the nursery. Mrs. Montague, followed by Arthur, moved purposefully down the hall, past the cold spot in the hall, and shivered. I will certainly need extra blankets, she said. Have that young man bring extra blankets from one of the other rooms. Opening the nursery door, she nodded and said, The bed looks quite fresh, I must admit, but has the room been aired? I told Mrs. Dudley, the doctor said. It smells musty, Arthur. You will have to open that window in spite of the cold. Drearily, the animals on the nursery wall looked down on Mrs. Montague. Are you sure? The doctor hesitated and glanced up apprehensively at the grinning faces over the nursery door. I wonder if you ought to have someone in here with you, he said. My dear, Mrs. Montague, good-humoured now in the presence of those who had passed beyond, was amused. How many hours have I sat in purest love and understanding, alone in a room, and yet never alone. My dear, how can I make you perceive that there is no danger where there is nothing but love and sympathetic understanding? I am here to help these unfortunate beings. I am here to extend the hand of heartfelt fondness and let them know that there are still some who remember, who will listen, and weep for them. Their loneliness is over, and I— Yes, the doctor said, but leave the door open. Unlocked, if you insist. Mrs. Montague was positively magnanimous. I shall be only down the hall, the doctor said. I can hardly offer to patrol, since that will be Arthur's occupation, but if you need anything, I can hear you. Mrs. Montague laughed and waved her hand at him. These others need your protection so much more than I, she said. I will do what I can, of course, but they are so very, very vulnerable, with their hard hearts and their unseeing eyes. Arthur, followed by Luke, looking very much amused, returned from checking the other bedrooms on the floor and nodded briskly at the doctor. All clear, he said. Perfectly safe for you to go to bed now. Thank you, the doctor told him soberly, and then said to his wife, Good night. Be careful. Good night, Mrs. Montague said, and smiled around at all of them. Please don't be afraid, she said. No matter what happens, remember that I am here. Good night, Theodora said. Good night, said Luke, and with Arthur behind them, assuring them that they might rest quietly and not to worry if they heard shots, and he would start his first patrol at midnight, Eleanor and Theodora went into their own room, and Luke on down the hall to his. After a moment, the doctor, turning reluctantly away from his wife's closed door, followed. Wait, Theodora said to Eleanor once in their room. Luke said they want us down the hall. Don't get undressed. Be quiet. She opened the door a crack and whispered over her shoulder, I swear that old Biddy's going to blow this house wide open with that perfect love business. If I ever saw a place that had no use for perfect love, it's Hill House. Now, Arthur's closed his door. Quick, be quiet. Silently, making no sound on the hall carpeting, they hurried in their stockinged feet down the hall to the doctor's room. Hurry, the doctor said, opening the door just wide enough for them to come in. Be quiet. It's not safe, Luke said, closing the door to a crack and coming back to sit on the floor. That man's going to shoot somebody. I don't like it, the doctor said, worried. Luke and I will stay up and watch, and I want you two ladies in here where we can keep an eye on you. Something's going to happen, he said. I do not like it. I just hope she didn't go and make anything mad with her planchette, Theodora said. Sorry, Dr. Montague, I don't intend to speak rudely of your wife. The doctor laughed, but stayed with his eye to the door. She originally planned to come for our entire stay, he said, but she had enrolled in a course in yoga and could not miss her meetings. She is an excellent woman in most respects, he added, looking earnestly around them. She is a good wife and takes very good care of me. She does things splendidly, really. Buttons on my shirts, he smiled hopefully. This, and he gestured in the direction of the hall, this is practically her only vice. Perhaps she feels she's helping you with your work, Eleanor said. The doctor grimaced and shivered. At that moment the door swung wide and then crashed shut, and in the silence outside they could hear slow, rushing movements, as though a very steady, very strong wind were blowing the length of the hall. Glancing at one another, they tried to smile, tried to look courageous under the slow coming of the unreal cold, and then, through the noise of the wind, the knocking on the doors downstairs. Without a word, Theodora took up the quilt from the foot of the doctor's bed and folded it around Eleanor and herself, and they moved close together slowly in order not to make a sound. Eleanor, clinging to Theodora, deadly cold in spite of Theodora's arms around her, thought, He knows my name. He knows my name this time. The pounding came up the stairs, crashing on each step. The doctor was tense, standing by the door, and Luke moved over to stand beside him. It's nowhere near the nursery, he said to the doctor, and put his hand out to stop the doctor from opening the door. How weary one gets of this constant pounding, Theodora said ridiculously. Next summer I must really go somewhere else. There are disadvantages everywhere, Luke told her. By the lake regions you get mosquitoes. Could we have exhausted the repertoire of Hill House? Theodora asked, her voice shaking in spite of her light tone. Seems like we've heard this pounding act before. Is it going to start everything all over again? The crashing echoed along the hall, seeming to come from the far end, the farthest from the nursery, and the doctor, tense against the door, shook his head anxiously. I'm going to have to go out there, he said. She may be frightened, he told them. Eleanor, rocking to the pounding, which seemed inside her head as much as in the hall, holding tight to Theodora, said, They know where we are. And the others, assuming that she meant Arthur and Mrs. Montague, nodded and listened. The knocking, Eleanor told herself, pressing her hands to her eyes and swaying with the noise, will go on down the hall. It will go on to the end of the hall and turn and come back again. It will just go on the way it did before, and then it will stop, and we will look at each other and laugh and try to remember how cold we were, and the little swimming curls of fear on our backs. After a while it will stop. It will hurt us, Theodora was telling the doctor across the noise of the pounding. It won't hurt them. I only hope she doesn't try to do anything about it, the doctor said grimly. He was still at the door, but seemingly unable to open it against the volume of noise outside. I feel positively like an old hand at this, Theodora said to Eleanor. Come closer, Nell, keep warm. And she pulled Eleanor even nearer to her under the blanket, and the sickening, still cold surrounded them. Then there came suddenly quiet, and the secret creeping silence they all remembered. Holding their breaths, they looked at one another. The doctor held the doorknob with both hands, and Luke, although his face was white and his voice trembled, said lightly, Brandy, anyone? My passion for spirits. Oh, no, Theodora giggled wildly. Not that pun, she said. Sorry. You won't believe me, Luke said, the brandy decanter rattling against the glass as he tried to pour. But I no longer think of it as a pun. That is what living in a haunted house does for a sense of humour. Using both hands to carry the glass, he came to the bed where Theodora and Eleanor huddled under the blanket, and Theodora brought out one hand and took the glass. Here, she said, holding it to Eleanor's mouth. Drink. Sipping. Not warmed, Eleanor thought. We are in the eye of the storm. There is not much more time. She watched Luke carefully carry a glass of brandy over to the doctor and hold it out, and then, without comprehending, watched the glass slip through Luke's fingers to the floor as the door was shaken violently and silently. Luke pulled the doctor back, and the door was attacked without sound, seeming almost to be pulling away from its hinges, almost ready to buckle and go down, leaving them exposed. Backing away, Luke and the doctor waited, tense and helpless. It can't get in, Theodora was whispering over and over, her eyes on the door. It can't get in. Don't let it get in. It can't get in. The shaking stopped. The door was quiet, and a little caressing touch began on the doorknob, feeling intimately and softly, and then, because the door was locked, patting and fondling the door frame, as though wheedling to be let in. It knows we're here, Eleanor whispered, and Luke, looking back over his shoulder, gestured furiously for her to be quiet. It's so cold, Eleanor thought childishly. I'll never be able to sleep again with all this noise coming from inside my head. How can these others hear the noise when it's coming from inside my head? I'm disappearing, inch by inch, into this house. I'm going apart a little bit at a time because all this noise is breaking me. Why are the others frightened? She was aware dully that the pounding had begun again. The metallic, overwhelming sound of it washed over her like waves. She put her cold hands to her mouth to feel if her face was still there. I've had enough, she thought. I am too cold. At the nursery door, Luke said tensely, speaking clearly through the noise. At the nursery door, don't, and he put out a hand to stop the doctor. Purest love, Theodora said madly, purest love, and she began to giggle again. If they don't open the doors, Luke said to the doctor. The doctor stood now with his head against the door, listening, with Luke holding his arm to keep him from moving. Now we're going to have a new noise, Eleanor thought, listening to the inside of her head. It is changing. The pounding had stopped, as though it had proved ineffectual, and there was now a swift movement up and down the hall, as of an animal pacing back and forth with unbelievable impatience, watching first one door and then another, alert for a movement inside. And there was again the little babbling murmur which Eleanor remembered. "Am I doing it?" she wondered quickly. "Is that me?" And heard the tiny laughter beyond the door, mocking her. "Fee, fi, fo, fum," Theodora said under her breath, and the laughter swelled and became a shouting. "It's inside my head," Eleanor thought, putting her hands over her face. "It's inside my head, and it's getting out, getting out, getting out." Now the house shivered and shook, the curtains dashing against the windows, the furniture swaying, and the noise in the hall became so great that it pushed against the walls. They could hear breaking glass as the pictures in the hall came down, and perhaps the smashing of windows. Luke and the doctor strained against the door as though desperately holding it shut, and the floor moved under their feet. We're going, Eleanor thought, and heard Theodora say, far away, "The house is coming down." She sounded calm and beyond fear. Holding to the bed, buffeted and shaken, Eleanor put her head down and closed her eyes and bit her lips against the cold, and felt the sickening drop as the room fell away beneath her, and then righted itself, and then turned, slowly swinging. "God Almighty!" Theodora said, and a mile away, at the door, Luke caught the doctor and held him upright. "Are you all right?" Luke called, back braced against the door, holding the doctor by the shoulders. "Theo, are you all right?" "Hanging on," Theodora said. "I don't know about Nell." "Keep her warm," Luke said, far away. "We haven't seen it all yet." His voice trailed away. Eleanor could hear and see him far away in the distant room where he and Theodora and the doctor still waited. In the churning darkness where she fell endlessly, nothing was real, except her own hands, white about the bedpost. She could see them, very small, and see them tighten when the bed rocked and the wall leaned forward and the door turned sideways, far away. Somewhere there was a great shaking crash as some huge thing came headlong. "It must be the tower," Eleanor thought. "And I supposed it would stand for years. We're lost, lost. The house is destroying itself." She heard the laughter over all, coming thin and lunatic, rising in its little crazy tune, and thought, "No, it's over for me. It's too much," she thought. "I will relinquish my possession of this self of mine, abdicate, give over willingly what I never wanted at all. Whatever it wants of me, it can have." "I'll come," she said aloud, and was speaking up to Theodora, who leaned over her. The room was perfectly quiet. Between the still curtains at the window she could see the sunlight. Luke sat in a chair by the window. His face was bruised, and his shirt was torn, and he was still drinking brandy. The doctor sat back in another chair, his hair freshly combed, looking neat and dapper and self-possessed. Theodora, leaning over Eleanor, said, "She's all right, I think," and Eleanor sat up and shook her head, staring. Composed and quiet, the house lifted itself primly around her, and nothing had been moved. "How?" Eleanor said, and all three of them laughed. "Another day," the doctor said, and in spite of his appearance, his voice was one. "Another night," he said. "As I tried to say earlier," Luke remarked, "living in a haunted house plays hell with a sense of humour. I really did not intend to make a forbidden pun," he told Theodora. "How are they?" Eleanor asked, the words sounding unfamiliar, and her mouth stiff. "Both sleeping like babies," the doctor said. "Actually," he said, as though continuing a conversation begun while Eleanor slept, "I cannot believe that my wife stirred up that storm, but I do admit that one more word about pure love—" "What happened?" Eleanor asked. "I must have been gritting my teeth all night," she thought, "the way my mouth feels." "Hill House went dancing," Theodora said, "taking us along on a mad midnight fling. At least, I think it was dancing. It might have been turning somersaults." "It's almost 9, the doctor said. "When Eleanor is ready—" "Come along, baby," Theodora said, Theo will wash your face for you and make you all neat for breakfast. Chapter 8. Did anyone tell them that Mrs. Dudley clears at 10? Theodora looked into the coffee pot speculatively. The doctor hesitated. I hate to wake them after such a night. But Mrs. Dudley clears at 10. They're coming, Eleanor said. I can hear them on the stairs. I can hear everything, all over the house, she wanted to tell them. Then, distantly, they could all hear Mrs. Montague's voice raised in irritation, and Luke, realizing, said, Oh, Lord, they can't find the dining room, and hurried out to open doors. Properly aired, Mrs. Montague's voice preceded her, and she swept into the dining room, tapped the doctor curtly on the shoulder by way of greeting, and seated herself with a general nod to the others. I must say, she began at once, that I think you might have called us for breakfast. I suppose everything is cold. Is the coffee bearable? Good morning, Arthur said sulkily, and sat down himself with an air of sullen ill-temper. Theodora almost upset the coffee-pot in her haste to set a cup of coffee before Mrs. Montague. It seems hot enough, Mrs. Montague said. I shall speak to your Mrs. Dudley this morning in any case. That room must be aired. And your night? The doctor asked timidly. Did you spend a profitable night? If by profitable you meant comfortable, John, I wish you would say so. No. In answer to your most civil inquiry, I did not spend a comfortable night. I did not sleep a wink. That room is unendurable. Noisy old house, isn't it? Arthur said. Branch kept tapping against my window all night. Nearly drove me crazy. Tapping and tapping. Even with the windows open, that room is stuffy. Mrs. Dudley's coffee is not as poor as her housekeeping. Another cup, if you please. I am astonished, John, that you put me in a room not properly aired. If there is to be any communication with those beyond, the air circulation, at least, ought to be adequate. I smell dust all night. Can't understand you, Arthur said to the doctor, letting yourself get all nervy about this place. Sat there all night long with my revolver, and not a mouse stirred, except for that infernal Branch tapping on the window. Nearly drove me crazy, he confided to Theodora. We will not give up hope, of course, Mrs. Montague scowled at her husband. Perhaps tonight there may be some manifestations. 2. Theo, Eleanor put down her notepad, and Theodora, scribbling busily, looked up with a frown. I've been thinking about something. I hate writing these notes. I feel like a damn fool trying to write this crazy stuff. I've been wondering. Well, Theodora smiled a little. You look so serious, she said. Are you coming to some great decision? Yes, Eleanor said, deciding. About what I'm going to do afterwards, after we all leave Hill House. Well? I'm coming with you, Eleanor said. Coming where with me? Back with you, back home, And Eleanor smiled wryly. I'm going to follow you home. Theodora stared. Why? She asked blankly. I never had anyone to care about, Eleanor said, wondering where she had heard someone say something like this before. I want to be someplace where I belong. I'm not in the habit of taking home stray cats, Theodora said lightly. Eleanor laughed too. I am a kind of stray cat, aren't I? Well, Theodora took up her pencil again. You have your own home, she said. You'll be glad enough to get back to it when the time comes. Nell, my Nellie. I suppose we'll all be glad to get back home. What are you saying about those noises last night? I can't describe them. I'll come, you know, Eleanor said. I'll just come. Nellie, Nellie, Theodora laughed again. Look, she said, this is just a summer. Just a few weeks' visit to a lovely old summer resort in the country. You have your life back home. I have my life. When the summer's over, we go back. We'll write each other, of course, and maybe visit, but Hill House is not forever, you know. I can get a job. I won't be in your way. I don't understand, Theodora threw down her pencil in exasperation. Do you always go where you're not wanted? Eleanor smiled placidly. I've never been wanted anywhere, she said. 3. It's all so motherly, Luke said. Everything so soft, everything so padded. Great embracing chairs and sofas which turn out to be hard and unwelcoming when you sit down and reject you at once. Theo, Eleanor said softly, and Theodora looked at her and shook her head in bewilderment. And hands everywhere, little soft glass hands curving out to you, beckoning. Theo, Eleanor said. No, Theodora said, I won't have you, and I don't want to talk about it any more. Perhaps, Luke said, watching them, the single most repulsive aspect is the emphasis upon the globe. I ask you to regard impartially the lampshade made of tiny pieces of broken glass glued together, or the great round balls of the lights on the stairs, or the fluted iridescent candy jar at Theo's elbow. In the dining room, there's a bowl of particularly filthy yellow glass resting upon the cupped hands of a child, and an Easter egg of sugar with a vision of shepherds dancing inside. A bosomy lady supports the stair rail on her head, and under glass in the drawing room, Nellie, leave me alone. Let's walk down to the brook or something. A child's face done in cross-stitch. Nell, don't look so apprehensive. Theo has only suggested that you walk down to the brook. If you like, I will go along. Anything, Theodora said, to frighten away rabbits. If you like, I will carry a stick. If you like, I will not come at all. Theo has only to say the word. Theodora laughed. Perhaps Nell would rather stay here and write on walls. So unkind, Luke said. Callous of you, Theo. I want to hear more about the shepherds dancing in the Easter egg, Theodora said. A world contained in sugar. 6 very tiny shepherds dancing, and a shepherdess in pink and blue reclining upon a mossy bank enjoying them. There are flowers and trees and sheep, and an old goatherd playing pipes. I would have liked to have been a goatherd, I think. If you were not a bullfighter, Theodora said. If I were not a bullfighter. Nell's affairs are the talk of the cafes, you will recall. Pan, Theodora said. You should live in a hollow tree, Luke. Nell, Luke said. You're not listening. I think you frighten her, Luke. Because Hill House will be mine some day, with its untold treasures and its cushions. I am not gentle with a house now. I might take a fit of restlessness and smash the sugar Easter egg, or shatter the little child hands, or go stomping and shouting up and down the stairs, striking at glued glass lamps with a cane, and slashing at the bosomy lady with the staircase on her head. I might— You see, you do frighten her. I believe I do, Luke said. Nell, I'm only talking nonsense. I don't think he even owns a cane, Theodora said. As a matter of fact, I do. Nell, I'm only talking nonsense. What's she thinking about, Theo? Theodora said carefully. She wants me to take her home with me after we leave Hill House, and I won't do it. Luke laughed. Poor silly Nell, he said. Journeys end in lovers' meeting. Let's go down to the brook. A mother house, Luke said, as they came down the steps from the veranda to the lawn. A house-mother, a headmistress, a house-mistress. I'm sure I will be a very poor housemaster, like our Arthur, when Hill House belongs to me. I can't understand anyone wanting to own Hill House, Theodora said, and Luke turned and looked back with amusement at the house. You never know what you're going to want until you see it clearly, he said. If I never had a chance of owning it, I might feel very differently. What do people really want with each other, as Nell asked me once? What use are other people? It was my fault my mother died, Eleanor said. She knocked on the wall and called me, and I never woke up. I ought to have brought her the medicine. I always did before. But this time she called me, and I never woke up. You should have forgotten all that by now, Theodora said. I've wondered ever since if I did wake up. If I did wake up and hear her, and if I just went back to sleep, it would have been easy. And I've wondered about it. Turn here, Luke said, if we're going to the brook. You worry too much, Nell. You probably just like thinking it was your fault. It was going to happen sooner or later, in any case, Eleanor said, but of course, no matter when it happened, it was going to be my fault. If it hadn't happened, you would have never come to Hill House. We go single file along here, Luke said. Now, go first. Smiling, Eleanor went on ahead, kicking her feet comfortably along the path. Now I know where I am going, she thought. I told her about my mother, so that's all right. I'll find a little house, or maybe an apartment like hers. I'll see her every day, and we will go searching together for lovely things. Gold-rimmed dishes, and a white cat, and a sugar Easter egg, and a cup of stars. I will not be frightened or alone any more. I will call myself just Eleanor. Are you two talking about me? She asked over her shoulder. After a minute, Luke answered politely. A struggle between good and evil for the soul of Nell. I suppose I will have to be God, however. But of course she cannot trust either of us, Theodora said, amused. Not me, certainly, Luke said. Besides, Nell, Theodora said, we were not talking about you at all. As though I were the games mistress, she said, half angry, to Luke. I've waited such a long time, Helena was thinking. I finally earned my happiness. She came, leading them, to the top of the hill and looked down to the slim line of trees they must pass through to get to the brook. They're lovely against the sky, she thought, so straight and free. Luke was wrong about the softness everywhere, because the trees are hard, like wooden trees. They're still talking about me, talking about how I came to Hill House and found Theodora, and now I will not let her go. Behind her she could hear the murmur of their voices, edged sometimes with malice, sometimes rising in mockery, sometimes touched with a laughter almost of kinship. And she walked on, dreamily, hearing them come behind. She could tell when they entered the tall grass a minute after she did, because the grass moved hissingly beneath their feet, and a startled grasshopper leaped wildly away. I could help her in her shop, Eleanor thought. She loves beautiful things, and I would go with her to find them. We could go anywhere we pleased, to the edge of the world if we liked, and come back when we wanted to. He's telling her now what he knows about me, that I'm not easily taken in, that I had an oleander wall around me, and she is laughing because I'm not going to be lonely any more. They're very much alike, and they are very kind. I would not really have expected as much from them as they are giving me. I was very right to come, because journeys end in lovers' meeting. She came under the hard branches of the trees, and the shadows were pleasantly cool after the hot sun on the path. Now she had to walk more carefully because the path led downhill, and there were sometimes rocks and roots across her way. Behind her, their voices went on, quick and sharp, and then more slowly and laughing. I will not look back, she thought happily, because then they would know what I'm thinking. We will talk about it together some day, Theo and I, when we have plenty of time. How strange I feel, she thought, coming out of the trees onto the last steep part of the path going down to the brook. I'm caught in a kind of wonder. I'm still with Joy. I will not look around until I'm next to the brook, where she almost fell the day we came. I'll remind her about the golden fish in the brook, and about our picnic. She sat down on the narrow green bank and put her chin on her knees. I will not forget this one moment in my life, she promised herself, listening to their voices and their footsteps coming slowly down the hill. Hurry up, she said, turning her head to look for Theodora. And was silent. There was no one on the hill. Nothing but the footsteps coming clearly along the path and the faint, mocking laughter. Who? She whispered. Who? She could see the grass go down under the weight of the footsteps. She saw another grasshopper leap wildly away, and a pebble jar, and roll. She heard clearly the brush of footsteps on the path, and then, standing back hard against the bank, heard the laughter very close. Eleanor! Eleanor! And she heard it inside and outside her head. This was a call she had been listening for all her life. The footsteps stopped, and she was caught in a movement of air so solid that she staggered and was held. Eleanor! Eleanor! She heard through the rushing of air past her ears. Eleanor! Eleanor! And she was held tight against the bank and thought, Don't let me go, and then, "Stay, stay," as the firmness which held her slipped away, leaving her and fading. "Eleanor," she heard. "Eleanor," once more, and then she stood beside the brook, shivering as though the sun had gone, watching without surprise the vacant footsteps move across the water of the brook, sending small ripples going, and then over onto the grass on the other side, moving slowly and caressingly up and over the hill. "Come back," she almost said, standing shaking by the brook, and then she turned and ran madly up the hill, crying as she ran and calling, "Theo! Luke!" She found them in a little group of trees, leaning against the tree trunk and talking softly and laughing. When she ran to them, they turned, startled, and Theodora was almost angry. "What on earth do you want this time?" she said. "I waited for you by the brook." "We decided to stay here where it was cool," Theodora said. "We thought you heard us calling you, didn't we, Luke?" "Oh, yes," said Luke, embarrassed. "We were sure you heard us calling." "Anyway," Theodora said, "we were going to come along in a minute, weren't we, Luke?" "Yes," said Luke, grinning. "Oh, yes." 4. "Subterranean waters," the doctor said, waving his fork. "Nonsense. Does Mrs. Dudley do all your cooking? This asparagus is more than passable. Arthur, let the young man help you to asparagus." "My dear," the doctor looked fondly upon his wife, "it has become our custom to rest for an hour or so after lunch if you—" "Certainly not. I have far too much to do while I am here. I must speak to your cook. I must see that my room is aired. I must ready planchettes for another session this evening. Arthur must clean his revolver." "Mark of a fighting man," Arthur conceded. "Firearms always in good order." "You and these young people may rest, of course. Perhaps you do not feel the urgency which I do, the terrible compulsion to aid whatever poor souls wander restlessly here. Perhaps you find me foolish in my sympathy for them. Perhaps I am even ludicrous in your eyes, because I can spare a tear for a lost, abandoned soul left without any helping hand. Pure love." "Croquet?" Luke said hastily. "Croquet, perhaps?" He looked eagerly from one to another. "Badminton," he suggested. "A croquet." "Subterranean waters?" Theodora added helpfully. "No fancy sauces for me," Arthur said firmly. "Tell my fellows it's the mark of a cad." He looked thoughtfully at Luke. "Mark of a cad. Fancy sauces. Women waiting on you. My fellows wait on themselves. Mark of a man," he said to Theodora. "And what else do you teach them?" Theodora asked politely. "Teach, you mean, do they learn anything, my fellows? You mean algebra, like Latin?" "Certainly." Arthur sat back pleased. "Leave all that kind of thing to the teachers," he explained. "And how many fellows are there in your school?" Theodora leaned forward, courteous, interested, making conversation with a guest, and Arthur basked. At the head of the table, Mrs. Montague frowned and tapped her fingers impatiently. "How many? How many? Got a crack tennis team, you know." He beamed on Theodora. "Crack. Absolutely top hole. Not counting milksops?" "Not counting," said Theodora. "Milksops. Oh, tennis, golf, baseball, track, cricket." He smiled slyly. "Didn't guess we played cricket, did you? Then there's swimming and volleyball. Some fellows go out for everything, though," he told her anxiously. "All round types. Maybe 70 altogether." "Arthur?" Mrs. Montague could contain herself no longer. "No sharp talk now. You're on vacation, remember?" "Yes, that's silly of me." Arthur smiled fondly. "Got to check the weapons," he explained. "It's 2 o'clock," Mrs. Dudley said in the doorway. "I clear off at 2. 5. Theodora laughed, and Eleanor, hidden deep in the shadows behind the summer house, put her hands over her mouth to keep from speaking, to let them know she was there. "I've got to find out," she was thinking. "I've got to find out." "It's called the Grattan Murders," Luke was saying. "Lovely thing. I can even sing it if you prefer." "Mark of a cad," Theodora laughed again. "Poor Luke. I would have said scoundrel. If you would rather be spending this brief hour with Arthur. Of course I'd rather be with Arthur. An educated man is always an enlivening companion. Cricket, Luke said. Never would have thought we played cricket, would you? Sing, sing, Theodora said, laughing. Luke sang in a nasal monotone, emphasizing each word distinctly. The first was young Miss Grattan, she tried not let him in. He stabbed her with a corn knife, that's how his crimes begin. The next was Grandma Grattan, so old and tired and grey. She fit off her attacker until her strength gave way. The next was Grandpa Grattan, a-settin' by the fire. He crept up close behind him and strangled him with a wire. The last was Baby Grattan, all in his trundle bed. She stove him in the short ribs until that child was dead, and spit tobacco juice all on his golden head. When he was finished, there was a moment's silence, and then Theodora said weakly, It's lovely, Luke, perfectly beautiful. I'll never hear it again without thinking of you. I plan to sing it to Arthur, Luke said. When are they going to talk about me? Eleanor wondered in the shadows. After a minute, Luke went on idly. I wonder what the doctor's book will be like when he writes it. Do you suppose he'll put us in? You will probably turn up as an earnest young psychic researcher, and I will be a lady of undeniable gifts, but dubious reputation. I wonder if Mrs. Montague will have a chapter to herself, and Arthur, and Mrs. Dudley. I hope he doesn't reduce us all to figures on a graph. I wonder, said Luke. It's warm this afternoon, he said. What could we do that's cool? We could ask Mrs. Dudley to make her lemonade. You know what I want to do, Luke said. I want to explore. Let's follow the brook up into the hills and see where it comes from. Maybe there's a pond somewhere. We can go swimming. Or a waterfall. It looks like a brook that runs naturally from a waterfall. Come on, then. Listening behind the summer house, Eleanor heard their laughter and the sound of their feet running down the path to the house. 6. Here's an interesting thing here, Arthur's voice said in the manner of one endeavouring valiantly to entertain. Here in this book says how to make candles out of ordinary children's crayons. Interesting, the doctor sounded weary. If you will excuse me, Arthur, I have all these notes to write up. Sure, Doctor, all got our work to do. Not a sound. Eleanor, listening outside the parlour door, heard the small irritating noises of Arthur settling down to be quiet. Not much to do round here, is there? Arthur said. How do you pass the time generally? Working, the doctor said shortly. You writing down what happens in the house? Yes. You got me in there? No. Seems like you ought to put in our notes from the planchette. What are you writing now? Arthur, can you read or something? Sure. Never meant to make a nuisance of myself. Eleanor heard Arthur take up a book and put it down, and light a cigarette and sigh and stir, and finally say, Listen, isn't there anything to do round here? Where is everybody? The doctor spoke patiently, but without interest. Theodora and Luke have gone to explore the brook, I think, and I suppose the others are around somewhere. As a matter of fact, I believe my wife was looking for Mrs. Dudley. Oh, Arthur sighed again. Might as well read, I guess, he said, and then, after a minute, Say, Doctor, I don't like to bother you, but listen what he says here in this book. 7. No, Mrs. Montague said, I do not believe in throwing young people together promiscuously, Mrs. Dudley. If my husband had consulted me before arranging this fantastic house party. Well, now, it was Mrs. Dudley's voice, and Eleanor, pressing against the dining-room door, stared and opened her mouth wide against the wooden panels of the door. I always say, Mrs. Montague, that you're only young once. Those young people are enjoying themselves, and it's only natural for the young. But living under one roof! It's not as though they weren't grown up enough to know right from wrong. That pretty Theodora lady's old enough to take care of herself, I think, no matter how gay Mr. Luke. I need a dry dish towel, Mrs. Dudley, for the silverware. It's a shame, I think, the way children grow up these days, knowing everything. There should be more mysteries for them, more things that belong rightly to grown-ups that they have to wait to find out. Then they find them out the hard way. Mrs. Dudley's voice was comfortable and easy. Dudley brought in these tomatoes from the garden this morning, she said. They did well this year. Shall I start on them? No, oh no, you sit over there and rest. You've done enough. I'll put on the water and we'll have a nice cup of tea. 8. Journey's end in lovers' meeting, Luke said, and smiled across the room at Eleanor. Does that blue dress on Thea really belong to you? I've never seen it before. I am Eleanor, Theodora said wickedly, because I have a beard. You were wise to bring clothes for two, Luke told Eleanor. Thea would never have looked half so well in my old blazer. I am Eleanor, Theo said, because I am wearing blue. I love my love with an E because she is ethereal. Her name is Eleanor, and she lives in expectation. She's being spiteful.
I hope you felt every word of this journey, just as deeply as I felt telling it to you. If you want to stay part of the story, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Something even more captivating is already on its way. Until next time.